let's talk about the theme of Yakuza 6. This has nothing to do with visual language, but I'm not going to pass up an opportunity to talk about the theme of something in a situation where I actually know the theme. Like, I don't have to try and figure out what the theme was or state it in my own language. I don't have to, because they literally spell it out for us, for the people in the back. This video is them telling us what the theme of the game is, and it's not off the cuff. It's very clear that that is actually the theme of the game. All of the characters in the game are oriented around that theme. The theme is that spending time together is what creates family bonds. Just because you share blood doesn't automatically bond you. You're not automatically going to like each other or support each other or understand each other. You have to spend time together to do that stuff. And similarly, even if you're not blood related, if you spend time together and support each other and work with each other, you're going to be family. That's the theme of the game. And all of the characters in the game are arranged around that theme, for the most part. I like this theme. This is a good theme, and it's obviously a very resonant theme. Game devs work 60, 80-hour weeks. This is like the 8th game in the Yakuza series, so they've been doing this game for 15 years, working 60 hours, 70 hours, 80 hours a week. They haven't seen their kids in decades. It's going to resonate. Clearly, all of the devs were on board with this. There's a lot of love put in on these aspects, on this theme. But it's also very clear that this is not the story they tried to tell. Mid-production, something catastrophic happened to this game. The pieces no longer fit together. This story was not written. This story was salvaged. This story was put together at 2 a.m. on a Saturday when they said, yeah, we've got to find a way to cut 10 hours out of our 16-hour storyline. Disaster. Now, this is a really interesting study because they put together a really amazing foundation. They put together an astonishingly solid foundation, and it's worth looking at that. It's worth looking at the foundation, and it's worth looking at the way it kind of fizzles. And it doesn't fizzle because the writers were bad. It fizzled because production went haywire. Something bad happened, and the writing obviously couldn't adapt. And that's not a sign of bad writers, that's a sign of bad production staff or something. Catastrophic happening. So when we say, maybe it would have been like this, or maybe it should have been like this, that's not me going, if I had written Yakuza 6, it would be genius. No, that's me trying to figure out what they were doing. Because most of what they were doing was pretty good. I only have 2 small complaints. I only have 1 small complaint and 1 big complaint. Right? So let's talk about it. First off, theme. I know some people don't like the idea of themes. Yakuza does. The Yakuza staff use themes all the time. All of their games are very, very tightly themed. You can watch my Yakuza 0 video for details on that. Their way of using themes is to create lenses on the main character's journey. So as the main character does stuff and feels stuff, everything else, all the side quests, all the enemies, will be arranged around that same theme. So if the character is, pretending to be somebody they're not, then all of the side quests will be about people pretending to be people they're not. And you'll get to see how those work out, how different people handle the same sorts of situations. It'll add breadth and depth and anchor you so that you'll understand what the character is going through, what the hero is going through, what might happen, what might have happened, how things could have worked out. This game is much shorter, so it's mostly tied to the actual core plot rather than to side stories. I really enjoy this approach, and it's something that works very well. So let's give you an example. The theme is that spending time together is what creates family bonds. You can't rely on just being blood related. So the 2 new syndicates are the Yomei Alliance, that's these guys, and the Chinese Mafia, which would be these guys. So these 2 groups have 2 different lenses on the same idea. So for the Chinese Mafia, in this game, they're obsessed with bloodlines. So this father here just assumes that his son is going to become his successor and doesn't really spend any time with his kid. Because of that, he doesn't understand his kid, and his kid ends up accidentally betraying him in a desperate attempt to please him, and then dies. On the other hand, in the Yomei Alliance, these guys, that's the son, and this is the father. The father has the opposite idea. The father wants his son to not succeed him. He's planning on closing the Yomei Alliance down and brushing all the Yakuza off of these fine businesses that he's acquired, and then just giving all of these clean businesses to his son and making his son into an honest businessman. But again, he doesn't actually spend any time with his son, and he doesn't actually understand who his son is. So he is a little bit surprised when his son gets a badass Yakuza tattoo, takes out the Chinese Mafia, and then kills him. Surprise! Happy Father's Day. These are two lenses on the same idea. Both of these syndicate bosses have sons that they assume they know what is best for. They both assume that, their vision for what their sons should be is what matters, and neither of them actually ask their son what their son, what he wants. So both of them are brought low by, their family is torn apart by this. This is like not even close to the only times this happens. Like every character in the game has a family relationship except two. This guy doesn't, and this guy doesn't. Both of them aren't really involved with the core themes as much, as far as I can tell. But everybody else is. So let's talk about the core. Sorry about that, there was a siren. The core of this particular approach is you have the main character going through whatever the thematic journey is. And then you can arrange all of your satellites, all the other characters on their journeys, to create more lenses on that same kind of journey. So we are part of this whole concept. We are part of this discussion about spending time with family, and it starts off right at the beginning. This is our daughter, emotionally speaking. She's not actually, adopted, but we consider each other family because we spent time together. In the previous game, she tried to distance herself from us because she wanted to be a pop star and we were Yakuza, and the two are not terribly compatible. But at the end of the game, she decides to give up her pop starness to spend time with us, and that's how she puts it. She wants to spend time with her father. We're very touched by this, and we decide that we need to be worthy of spending time with our daughter. So we spend the next 3 years working 80-hour weeks creating Yakuza 2 Remaster. I'm sorry, I mean in jail. So when we're in jail, we brush off all that Yakuza-ness, and that is how we're going to be worthy of our daughter. But that's the thing about this theme. The theme says nothing about having to be worthy, because that's not the point. You don't have to be worthy. You just have to spend time together. We make the same mistake as the Yomei Alliance captain and the Chinese Mafia boss. We make the same mistake as most of the major villains in this game. Instead of just spending time together, we pretend we know what's best, and we go do that instead. That's very powerful. Making that kind of mistake and then having to fix it over the course of the game is a common way to set this thing up. And when the theme resonates with other characters, we can easily see how they made the same mistake or similar mistakes and how it's working out for them and how it's not working out for them. And then at the end, we do the opposite. We restore, we fix it. We figure out what should have been, and we work at that. That's the basic idea in most cases. And that's clearly the basic idea they had for this. The idea is, we done fucked up. We shouldn't have gone to jail. That was dumb of us. By the way, spoilers. I'm pretty sure you already knew that. Spoilers, but we shouldn't have gone to jail. We shouldn't have done that. That was really stupid on our part. Now, my small complaint, the one thing I don't like very much about how they set this up, is that I think this was way too Haruka focused. Haruka doesn't show up in the game. She's just a widget. She has like 3 lines after this. But we spend all of this time with Haruka. These 7 videos are almost entirely about her. And the problem here is that we aren't really sold on the idea that our bond with her is dissolving because we can't see our bond. We choose to go into prison, and then there is like a 2-day sequence where she decides that she doesn't want to hang out in the orphanage anymore because people think she's Yakuza. And then she runs away. It's very touching. It's very well done. But it doesn't show that our bond is dissolving. It does show that we screwed up because we weren't there for her. But I can think of several other ways that I might have preferred to see this. For example, these 4 videos are of her putting together letters with the kids at the orphanage and sending those letters to us in jail. And then we open them up in jail and we read them. And as these episodes go on, the camera stops focusing on her writing the letters and starts focusing on us receiving the letters more and more and more. And we see her get a little taller, dress a little bit differently every time. And as the letters get thinner and thinner and our hair gets grayer and grayer, then it would really feel like we are drifting away from her, like our bond has been abandoned, like we made an incredibly bad choice. Which is fine. Like, that's what Kiryu does. Kiryu makes bad choices. That is a way that would have sold us on the idea that this is about the way you have to spend time together. It's not about just being there once in a while or whatever. It's not about some catastrophe that happens or some breakdown. It's just about time. It's just about the weight of time. Because when you're building the core character progression, when you're building the core plot for the main character, you have to make sure that you absolutely nail the theme. You don't have to nail the cinematography. You don't have to nail the dialogue. You don't have to nail the editing. But you do have to nail the theme, because every other window, every other lens on that same theme is going to be reflected off of the main character. So if the player is unsure what the main character is doing, what their theme is, then they're not going to see how the other theme connects, how the other elements connect. It's just not going to reflect properly. We're not going to feel like those have emotional connection to us because we didn't understand what our emotional truth was. To me, this is made substantially worse by the continuous inclusion of fan service from earlier games and just delays. And this is like so many characters we never see again. We never see these kids again. We never see any of our brothers again. These episodes are all us tracking down people from earlier games because, hey, we need to show that the earlier games existed, I guess. It just goes on, and it has nothing to do with the theme, and it's very distracting. So that's why my minor complaint is that this part of this chapter is super flabby and not particularly well suited to making us realize that we should have been spending time with Haruka. It could have been clearer, is what I'm saying. But that's not a huge complaint, and if the game had been longer, I think we would have been able to really hammer home that feeling. But when it got shortened, I think that a lot of elements got lost in the wash. Let's just adjust the mic for a second here. So one of the other groups in this game is the Hirose Clan. The Hirose Clan, I've already done a video on Hirose. It's these guys. These people are family. They're not blood related, but Hirose grabbed all these orphans and made them into Yakuza, and they love each other because they spent time together. They've bonded. They're a very tight-knit group, and that's made extremely clear, and it works pretty well, aside from the fact that it doesn't get any screen time. It could have done with a lot more Hirose onboard screen time. We never really feel that they're super, super tightly connected to Hirose, aside from the loudmouth, this guy on the right here. He's definitely connected to Hirose, definitely loves Hirose, but we never really feel that bond with the other character, except for in very, very minor moments. And that seems like it's just a matter of not having enough time to develop everything. Later on in the game, spoilers, this happens, and Hirose dies. Hirose makes it clear that he killed their fathers, and that's why he adopted them, because he felt guilty for killing their fathers. This is an incredibly important twist. It's an incredibly important lens, because the idea of the theme is that when you spend time together, you can bond. You can become family. How can you make that the most obvious possible, extreme? The point is not to be worthy. There's no worthiness. There's no judgment of your personality or qualities here. You just have to spend time with each other. You just have to be there for each other. How can we make that clear? We can have you become family with someone that killed your family. And that's exactly what happens. Even after Hirose admits that he killed their fathers, they still love him. He's dead now, and they're very conflicted about the whole thing, and they spend at least one video in this chapter talking about how conflicted they are about this mess. And I think that could have been hammered just a little bit harder. It could have been made a lot clearer. This whole thing happens bam, 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 real fast, and that's probably just because of the constraints of the development cycle. And if we could have made that just a little bit clearer, made it so that they talked about the time they spent with Hirose, to really hammer home that this is about spending time. This is about being there for each other. They could talk about when Hirose was there for them. But they don't. They rush through it, lickety-split. You just get the most bare-bones summary that you need in order to believe that you might go on this mission, and then they're done trying to make any sort of emotional impact. And that's the problem. With no time, they can't really create the kind of emotional connections that you need, and that ends up doing them a great disservice. There are a lot of other characters in this that are worth discussing. For example, the Chinese Mafia boss. There is a scene missing. This is really interesting to me because it's very clear that they chose to make this scene exist and then never put it in. So the story here is that his son, his firstborn son, died in an assassination attempt against him. But they never show that scene, and it's super obvious that they meant to, because the Chinese Mafia boss makes really important decisions off screen. The Chinese Mafia boss goes from being obsessed with bloodlines to being completely hands off. Yes, my son can do whatever he wants. I do not want to, have him succeed me. He can do absolutely anything. I don't care about his grandchild, which I should care about. It should be something that I hate because it's a mixed blood. But I don't. It's fine. It's all fine. I just want my son to live. He goes through that shift off screen. And it's super, super obvious to me that at some point they had a scene planned out where, he would be raging against his firstborn son for screwing up this Tokyo situation, be yelling at his son. His son would be there in tears, and then assassins pop in through the window, raise their guns at the Mafia boss, and the son's like, "No, Dad," and jumps in the way and gets shot, and then his father's like, "No, my son, I just want you to live. Oh, I regret everything." It's super obvious that scene was in the cards. They wrote it, but it's not in the game. So all of that just happens off screen. That said, this is a very powerful emotional sequence. This is when his second son, Yuta, decides to assassinate him because there is a terminal lack of communication. There's no reason for Yuta to try and assassinate him, but Yuta is convinced that this guy is going to try and kill the baby, even though this guy doesn't want to and isn't responsible for what happened to the baby. So there's this really cool scene where Yuta shows up and sets the whole place on fire, and it's pretty neat. It's got a really wonderful fight in it, and it's very well done. It's a little bit forced, though, because there is this focus on bloodlines in this scene, and I mean, that's pretty clear, right? The whole point is that he's the last remaining bloodline of this Mafia boss. But Kiryu is really hammering it home that he has, a son, and you shouldn't have your son grow up to be an orphan. And I can understand that, except that the first half of that conflict is about how your blood relations don't matter. So it's this thing where they suddenly shift from not mattering to mattering, and it's a bit of a sudden like twist. And I think that just comes from the speed that the whole thing unfolds at. And also, I have a sneaking suspicion that Yuta was not supposed to be this guy's son. Let me explain. There is one facet missing from the demonstration of all of the different kinds of things that this theme can show us. We have a couple of families where they're not blood related. For example, us and Haruka. We're not blood related. And similarly, Hirose and his troop of Yakuza aren't blood related. But those are established. Those are ready. What's missing is bonding with someone. What's missing is the idea that you become family by spending time together. And I think that the original plan, and I'm just guessing here, I think that the original plan was for Yuta to not be the father. I think he was just some random dude that got along really well with the baby. And the idea would be that he would become the baby's father just by the fact that he's the one that spends time with the baby. Instead, they go into a fairly long thing where he has to decide that he's going to take responsibility for the baby and all that jazz, which is good. It's solid. But it leaves a really strange gap in what the theme tries to talk about, which is the fact that you can establish familial relations. You can become a family by spending time together. And that's never shown in the game. So that feels like a missed situation. It feels like they had it planned out one way and then had to shift it and go the other way. That would also explain why Yuta being the Mafia boss's son makes no sense, which I went into some other videos. Down here we've got Somei. Rah! Down, I guess. The Somei's in here too. Somei is a member of our Yakuza group. So the Yakuza group in Tokyo has a similar situation to the other Yakuza group, but they're not blood related. The boss that stole our Yakuza group, Sugai. Sugai is essentially Somei's father, but they're definitely not blood related. It's father and son in a syndicate sort of way. And they do not get along, and they do not understand each other, and they do not want to. And it's very clear that they were supposed to be the third angle on that debate. Like, you've got the Chinese Mafia boss, you've got the Yomei Alliance boss, and then you've got Sugai and Somei. And clearly those three were supposed to be three different takes on the same idea of succession. Like, who's going to come into power behind them? It's going to be my son. It's not going to be my son. It's not going to be this twerp. The idea there is that there were a lot of different takes on the same set of ideas. And we also had a successor. We put our successor in. And so the idea is that after Sugai and Somei fight a bunch and things go wrong, down at the end, we end up trying to bond with Sugai, or with our replacement, the sixth chairman, our son, the sixth chairman. We try and make up for the fact that we weren't there for them. That doesn't end up working, which we'll talk about. But let's finish with Somei first, because Somei actually has two character bonds, two familial bonds. So the first one is with the patriarch of the Tokyo Yakuza. He's obviously looking up to the older men of the Tokyo Yakuza as a source of authority. There are people he wants to impress. He wants to make sure, he's trying to earn the most money and be the most efficient to try and earn his place among them. Sort of like, say, a teenager would view their father. They're just trying to prove that he's worth something. He doesn't necessarily show that he appreciates them, and maybe he doesn't appreciate them, but they're still the source of authority. They're what he wants to be. But Somei is also related to the bar mama that takes care of your baby. He married her, and they had a daughter. And Somei beat her, not the daughter, the bar mama. And so she ran away, and she left her daughter behind. And that is a torn-up family. That is a family with some serious, problems. They can't spend time together. They literally rip themselves apart. At the end of the game, Somei sacrifices himself to try and save his wife, or his ex-wife, and tries to make sure that his daughter can be cared for by the other Yakuza team. And I mean, it doesn't exactly work out, but it's very emotionally fraught. It works out well from a writing standpoint, not from a sacrificing yourself to save someone standpoint. So Somei's truth there is really interesting because Somei has the same problem that we do. He doesn't think he's worthy of his wife. He tries to play it off. He tries to, be smooth and disruptive. He's not trying to win her back. He's trying to drive her away a little bit, and goes on like that. And I mean, there are scenes where he's like saying, "Oh, if you want to see your daughter, you can come back anytime." But it's very clear that he's not trying to push it. He's not pursuing it because he doesn't think that he's worthy because he beat her, and to him that was not great. Obviously, it's not just to him. That's not great ever, but he internalized it especially as he's not worthy. And to me, it's pretty clear that he is pursuing authority and power and respect in a desperate attempt to prove that he's worthy of his wife and his daughter, his ex-wife and his daughter. We went to jail for the exact same reason. So you can see how the themes all come together and they all support each other. In terms of a foundation, the foundation is here. All of these things exist, and all of these things could have interweaved really wonderfully, and they still do for the most part. It's just that they're super rushed. If this had been given a little more time, a little more emotional power, I think it could have been really moving. But I do have one big complaint, and that is, well, basically the ending. First, it's this. In this, we write a letter to someone, and we're talking about how we should have spent time together. We assumed that we were family, but we didn't spend any time together. I should have been there for you. I should have spent time with you. And it's very clear that we're talking about Haruka, our daughter, in the background there. So this scene, we are literally depicted as turning our back on our daughter to write this letter. And then it turns out that the letter isn't even to our daughter. It's to someone that hasn't appeared in the fucking game. It is to the 6th chairman, our son. Now, from like a Yakuza 1 through 6 perspective, yeah, of course we want to talk about this dipshit because he is an important part of, like, I think it's Yakuza 2 he's introduced. He has a lot of backstory with us. But in terms of this game, he wasn't in it. This way that we decide that we're going to literally turn our back on our family to write to someone that wasn't in this game and tell him how much we should have spent time together. What's with that? Who made that decision? That's weird. I mean, obviously, I can see why it was made, because they wanted to bring the 6th chairman into this discussion. They wanted to create an emotional connection with him. But it comes out of nowhere, and it's at the expense of literally turning our back on our family. But that problem is not very significant. That's just a minor thing. The big problem is in this scene. You see, our arc ends up here when we punch out a very, very boring main boss, and then a rando tries to shoot our daughter, and we jump in the way. We're like, "No, daughter, I'll save you," and get shot. And then, "Oh, we're dying. Live your life, daughter. We love you." It's very emotional, as you can tell by my reacting. It's really pretty well done. I mean, the only problem with it is that the 2 end bosses are deeply unimpressing. They're just very boring characters, and they don't really exist. They're really rushed. So, it feels like, oh, he was killed by nobodies, which is kind of a shame. If they were going to go that route, I would have preferred it if he had literally been killed by a nobody, like a random Yakuza goon. Just absolutely nobody, because his path of violence brought him low. That might have been interesting, but instead it's by a really important guy that doesn't matter. Like, he's technically important, but I don't even remember his name. So I don't remember this guy's name either, for that matter. But we die. We get shot and we die protecting our daughter. And that's meaningful because, then we later reveal that we wrote a letter to her. Oh, wait, but it wasn't to her. We wrote a letter thinking that we might be dying, thinking that things might be getting tense. It was essentially our will, our last will and testament. And, it's very moving. It's very moving. And, it turns out we're fine. You cowards. You fucking cowards. Now, I'm presuming that this came down from on high. I'm presuming that when the writers wrote this, they killed the main character. Because Kiryu needs to die. That's part of his arc. He's a legend. And legends of this sort need to die. They can't go on forever. They have to end. And the way that they're supposed to end is when they're passing their torch. And in this case, we've just created our family. We have our daughter. We've got our grandkid. They've got their new in-law. It's a really stable place. And it's very clear that if we die sacrificing ourselves for them, that's like the best possible outcome for this character. Bringing him back to life is what you do when you realize that he's a cash cow. And you literally can't afford to kill him. Like, that would cost you money, so don't do it. And I could kind of see that too. So, okay, fine. We'll have a happy ending where Kazuma Kiryu walks up on, a cane or something because he got hit by a bullet. And he walks in and he's just going to bond with everybody. And everybody's like, oh, he's fine. Hooray. Let's all get together and spend time together, since that's what you do when you're family. The theme of the game that was brought up in this video and made concrete in this video is literally that you should spend time with your family, the family that's in this video. Anyway, in this video, he says, let's pretend I'm dead and I'll just go away and not spend time with anybody. It's literally the next video. So not only did the fucking cowards bring him back, they then completely sabotaged their own theme by having him write a letter about how important it is to be there for each other, to stand together, to spend time with each other. Bye, I'm ditching. See you never. The fuck? That's my big problem with this game. That's just bad writing, and I'm presuming it was enforced. I'm presuming that it came down from on high. And I know that they can try and wiggle around a little bit by saying, it would be disruptive if I was there or whatever. That's literally repeating the exact same mistake he made at the beginning of the game. That's not how themes are supposed to go. He's betraying the theme. The theme has been sabotaged. You've ruined the end of the game. At least that's what I think. Let me know what you think. See you around.